Now we're on. Okay, so one of the big problems that we have, amongst the many problems that we have, is that we're very distracted. As people, we're very distracted. And you can blame it on your phone, you can blame it on TV, streaming. You know, in the old days, it used to be, there was the 6 o'clock news, 10 o'clock news, that's it. Then they had 11 o'clock news, right? And then CNN came out with this 24-hour news, and everyone thought that's never going to last. Who wants news 24 hours? And now we have 24/7 news. But we're very, 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 very distracted. And you go onto any streaming service, and even before one show ends, they're already starting the other one. I was reading once how people go through was it Netflix or another streaming service. I'll just pick on Netflix. They don't actually end up watching anything. They're just scrolling. It's very hard to get someone's attention. So the question is how do we stay focused? Or how do we remain invested in what we're doing? Which is a very, very big problem. We all, even if you're not spending your time on Netflix, I know I'm picking on Netflix, or Disney Plus or whatever.
Any streaming
or TV, whatever it is. Even if, let's say you're a regular productive person, whatever that means, and you have a job and everything else. Many times when you're doing a job, you're thinking, okay, what do I have to be next?
Yep.
So.
And there's emails coming in, and there's text messages coming in.
Right. Except so very few people.
And
Hey, how you doing?
And there's late people coming in.
And late people coming in. I hope she's caught on camera as coming late.
I'm never late.
Well,
Except for this one.
Never say never.
Right? Yeah.
So one of the things we're dealing with is how do we remain invested in what we're doing? How do we not get distracted? Which is a very, very big problem. So let's say, for example, you're going out with your friends. Hi, Ira.
Another distraction.
Unbelievable. This guy, Ira, let me tell you about this guy. At this point, I think Ira's just doing it on purpose. He could be here on time. He just wants to get on camera. He wants you 15 seconds of fame. It's all right.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you in a while.
I know. So let's say you have an appointment to go with your friends, right? You're going to go out for dinner on let's say Shabbos on Saturday night, and Shabbat this week ends around 6:40, around the 6:30, and you guys made up to meet 8 o'clock in Miami Beach, and it's a 45-minute drive. And while it's Shabbat, you're supposed to be only focused on Shabbat. But you're thinking to yourself, okay, in 5 minutes, I have to go, get up, make Havzalah, have Mariv, change. So although it's Shabbat right now, you're not thinking about Shabbat, you're thinking about the next thing. We're all focused on thinking the next thing. Or we're taking pictures of the next thing. So at one time, I saw an interview. Well, actually, it wasn't even an interview, it was a pre-interview. Benjamin Netanyahu, one of his 15 terms, prime minister, so it was before the interview or something, and everyone just snapping pictures. And he asks the media people, so what are you guys taking pictures of? Everyone's always taking pictures. No one ever lives. Everyone's just taking pictures. And I realized, he's 100% right.
Yeah.
I realized that we go to my kid's production, whatever it is, and all the parents they're not seeing the kid. They're watching
event.
the kid
Yeah.
through the lens. And that's when I made up with Cyril that we take a 2-minute video and then we watch. Because we're all worried about missing the thing.
Yeah.
We're not living the thing that we're worried about missing. In fact, think about it. A lot of our events that we can remember, that are ingrained in our memory, are things we lived, not things we viewed. Or emotionally involved or something like that. So the question is, how do we be here, not there? Right? In your class, the Baal Shem Tov has a great line. You are where your mind is. How do you remain present? How do you remain focused? All right. So on page 59, there's a little exercise. So write down 5 roles you assume on an average day. parent, teacher, spouse, employee, friend, child, whatever it is, write down those 5. Are you planning on reselling the book, Michael J?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because he's not writing. You want your book to remain in mint condition. That's why I don't let anyone study from the books in my house. They're not actually for study. They're for presentation. And how am I supposed to sell it afterwards if there's a crack in the spine? I mean, please.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So please don't utilize any books in my house. That's a library so far.
Let me know when you're running your garage sale.
Exactly.
I'll stop by.
Okay, now, on a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being the maximum and 1 being the minimum, write down a number next to each one that represents the level of attention, focused investment you feel you should devote to each role. For example, so if item number 1 is parent, and if you feel you should be invested a maximum level of parenting, write down 5, right? Now, finally add to this question. It's yes or no. Do any of these roles conflict with each other? In other words, if your number is less than 5 on one list, do you feel that the other items wouldn't exist in your life and the number would be higher? Yes or no? So this is obviously, we all have things that are very important.
How are we supposed to number these?
5 being the most important.
Oh, the most important.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is, so we all have conflicting roles in our life, right? We all know that, like, my mother wants me to come fix her roof. My mother wants me to come fix her garage door opener, right?
She just wants you to come visit.
No, she actually saw it today, and every time I see her, the honey-do list, right? Can't figure it out, right? And your kids want your attention, everybody, and they're all important things, right? The question is, how do you remain present? So since this is a religious class based on the Torah, but obviously it's not some self-help meditative practice where you fold your legs and you think about it, or you watch a beautiful video, right? Or you watch a TikTok video. Exactly, you watch a TikTok video. This is what I do, and no, this is not. All right, let's go to the story in this week's parsha. So the story of this week's parsha involves one of the greatest miracles, arguably the greatest miracle of all time. Now you might say, Rabbi, thank you very much. I respect you, but who are you to rank it? So I have a certificate hanging in my office, which I printed offline. No kidding. So in the Talmud, when it talks about having the difficulty of matching up a man and a woman, properly matching up a man and a woman, it says it's as difficult for God as splitting the sea. So basically, the Talmud says that's like the greatest miracle of all time. Now we're not going to get into marriage and all of that. That's not what this class is about, because I want to keep it lightheaded. I don't want to turn into a therapy session. All right, so
Why should they?
the beautiful thing is Cyril. I don't think Cyril watches these recordings. I can say whatever I want. What?
There was a story you told on Shabbat one time about, and I don't remember whether it was David or Solomon, or which king it was.
Yeah.
I have a terrible memory for that. But he had one of his wives said, "What's so hard about matching people up?"
No, that wasn't his wives. It was the Queen of Sheba. The story is the Medrash tells the story that the Queen of Sheba came to visit King Solomon, and I ended up marrying him also,
Okay.
and asked him a question: What is God doing after He created the world? Right? He created the world. Now what? Golf.
Yeah.
Right? So he says he's
It's like a beautiful course.
right, exactly. is matchmaking. So he said, that's what God's doing. So he said, yeah. So that's not so hard. So being the queen, she had. I mean, the Medrash gives 1,000, but it doesn't necessarily mean 1,000. It means a bunch. She took 1,000 lads and 1,000 maidens, and she went candidate, kind of like one of these reality shows, you. She said, see how easy that it is? And King Solomon in his wisdom said, let's see what happens in the morning. And sure enough, the next morning, not everybody showed up. So whoever and the other ones who showed up had a broken this, a bleeding that, and not one of them worked out. And she understood that getting people to match together is a little bit harder than just Survivor or
Yeah, Survivor.
right or whatever. It is Survivor or some other reality show. Okay, let's get to the story this week's parsha. So the Jewish people are threatened by the Egyptians. Okay, why? Because the Egyptians changed their mind. I mean, I don't want to get into it. They actually thought the Jewish people were only living for 3 days, whatever. They changed their mind. They said, oh no, we let them out and we want to get them back. And God purposely led the Egyptians to believe the Jewish people were lost. He had the Jewish people turn back towards Egypt and go towards the sea. And Paro going. Remember, we spoke about the conversation that Paro had with Moshe. So Paro wanted to go tell Moshe, you see, your experiment failed. You went out into the desert. You don't know what you're doing. You're lost. You're going to kill 2 million people now. What are you doing? Come back. Come back and be productive, right? So Paro gives chase. And they're up by the sea, and they don't know what to do. And God says, go into the sea. And the sea splits. You have to realize, but the sea didn't turn into ice. Like if you see in some pictures or depictions, the sea turned into ice. No, the sea.
Like it froze.
No, it didn't freeze. The sea was water. It just, instead of water flowing, it's almost like they put these plexiglass dividers there. The water, I mean, the Midrashim go into all the crazy types of miracle. And by the way, the ocean floor or the sea floor was dry. It wasn't muddy, it was dry, as if you're walking outside of here. So now you're walking on Johnson and there's trees. Imagine that was water, and you're walking on dry land. Right? And also, and the Egyptians, and let me tell you, out of all the stories in the Torah, the one thing that I can never understand is what were the Egyptians thinking when they followed the Jews into the sea?
It's dry land.
I mean, like, I don't. Sometimes.
Hey, if they can go out in there and cross, why can't we?
10 plagues after the 10 plagues and everything else. And by the way, the Jewish people crossed the whole entire night. What was stopping the Egyptians from following the Jewish people immediately? There was a miraculous pillar of fire.
Yeah.
And every time they shot arrows, there was a cloud that kind of swallowed the arrow, so to speak. So after all those overnight miracles, what got into their head thinking, we can do this? Anyway, so
Hey,
What do we have to lose?
chance.
We can try.
Right.
They rolled the dice and they came up with snake eyes.
yeah, exactly. So they followed the Jews into the sea, and wouldn't you know it, their luck ran out. Right. I actually saw a great video. It says for investing in the stock market, so there's this stream of water that forms an arch, and the kids run and they're not wet, and then they decide to run back, and one kid goes and he makes it, but the kids are a little behind and they get soaking wet, right? Right, because
Timing is everything.
yeah, timing's everything, right? So what happened was the Egyptians. It says they adorned their chariots with gold and gems and everything else. So after the splitting of the sea, the Jewish people were very worried that maybe the Egyptians managed to make it out on the other side, and they're going to catch up to us. So God caused the bodies and the chariots to wash up on shore. It's proof they were dead. Now the Jewish people didn't say, "Oh, okay, they're dead." What it says, if you see in text 1a and 1b, is that they started collecting the gold and the gems. They got more loot from the splitting of the sea than when they left Egypt. Now, I mean, based on what we know from last week's parsha, whoever was paying attention, services,
I don't know why he's looking at us.
yeah, whoever was paying attention, we know the Jewish people left with a tremendous amount of money. You see in text 2a, it says, it's right here. Text 2a, that God gave the grace of the favor in the eyes of the Egyptians. And you see Rashi in text 2b said the Jewish people asked for one, they gave two. I mean, Jewish people were very, very rich. So why? So two questions happen over here. Number one, see the questions here on the board? No. The question number one is, why they in such desperation to collect more? They're already rich. If I say you can have $8 billion, then I say no, $7 billion. What are you going to do with $8 billion you can't do with $7 billion?
Give $1 billion away.
Yeah, right? It was like they had so much money. It says that they went with donkeys. In last week's parsha, we learned the mitzvah, the commandment that the firstborn donkey has to be redeemed. Do you know that? The firstborn sheep has to be given to the priest. And the firstborn donkey has to be redeemed. Why donkey? Out of all the animals, why donkey? The donkeys were the ones that carry the wealth. Every family left with 10 donkeys loaded with wealth, and now they're not more. When is enough? Another million? Right. And the next question, which I'll go back over here, is if you look at text 1a carefully, it says that Moshe made the Jewish people journey. So the question is, what does it mean he forced them away? I mean, the Jewish people didn't want to leave, and Moshe forced them away. Obviously, they were collecting, and Moshe had to force them away, right? Now, the Jewish people were on their way to, no, from Egypt, they're on their way to, come on guys, huh?
Canaan.
No, come on, the important stop on the way.
Oh, Mount Sinai.
Mount Sinai, to get the Torah. It wasn't a surprise. They were told you're going to leave Egypt and you're going to go to Sinai, get the Torah. It's going to be the greatest revelation of all time. One-time revelation, never to happen again. It's the greatest revelation of all time. And they were all in woohoo. The counting of the Omer, we have the counting of the days between Passover and Shavuot. Says because the Jewish people were so excited, they were counting the days. What happened to the spiritual fervor? What happened to their, all of a sudden you say, oh, I love services. It's like you think about a sandwich on Yom Kippur, right? You feel bad for thinking about a sandwich. You're thinking it's supposed to be a holy day. Why am I thinking about a sandwich, right?
Gurgle.
Exactly. But here they're supposed to be all excited about thinking about Mount Sinai. Ooh,
Shiny objects.
Shiny objects. Okay. So the commentaries explain this, and we'll do what the commentaries say, and then we'll get to what the what Chassidus says. And tonight, by the way, is a very, very important night in the Chabad calendar, in the Chassidic calendar, actually in the world Jewish calendar. Tonight is the night, Yartzeit, of the day of passing of the previous Rebbe. It's also the day anniversary that the Rebbe became Rebbe and changed world Jewry, and actually the entire world for what we are. I was actually at a Shiva house. People were telling me they're all over the place. There's Chabad and everything else helps everyone else, right? So we're going to learn the Chassidic philosophy. We're going to learn the spin the Rebbe has and how we can implement it in our life. Okay.
When traveling, the first thing I do is look, where's the Chabad nearby?
Yeah. Right. Is the Jew in need? So someone asked me by the Shiva house. So it's like,
You're not allowed to travel.
No, when I travel, it's usually the Crown Heights.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
a lot of Jewish people in Brooklyn. Yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's learn what the commentaries say. So the commentaries say that when the Jewish people are collecting the gold and silver, they actually thought they were doing what God wanted. Because if you remember from the first portion, or the second class in the book of Exodus, remember the whole thing where God asked the Jewish people, tell Moshe to please ask the Jewish people to take gold and silver that Abraham shouldn't complain, right? So it was a commandment from God to take the Egyptians' gold. They thought they were doing a commandment from. They weren't just overcome by greed and by shiny objects, like Michael J said. If you see in text number 3, this is the commandment, and then in text number 4 we have the Gemara, which we quoted in the second class in this book, text 4a, where the Jewish people were asked by God to please take the gold and silver from the Egyptians. So they took some of it by the Exodus, and now they were taking more by the splitting of the sea. In fact, they only collected the gold and silver because God asked. Moshe came to the Jewish people and said, guys, in a couple of days you're going to leave and you're going to be wealthy. Jewish people answered, how about we leave today poor? Right? If I went over to you, right?
Yeah, reasonable question.
Right? A guy's a maximum security prison. I'll say, next week you're going to leave and there's going to be a whole party for you. And he'll say, keep your party. I want to go free today. And that's maximum, that's prison where life is bad. Here's slavery. You see, the Gemara gives that example in text 4b. When the Jewish people were in Egypt, they said, I beg you, release me today, and I'll ask for nothing. So the commentaries explain that the people thought they were doing the right thing, and this is why it was hard to drag them away from the splitting of the sea. Because God commanded them to collect all the gold and silver from Egypt, and they were doing a mitzvah. So now going back to text 1a, when Moshe had to pull them away, it wasn't because they were overcome by greed. It was because they were occupied with doing a commandment from God. And Moshe had to come and say, guys. I understand you think this is a commandment, but we got a different commandment to do. That commandment is to go to Sinai. So now comes another question. What do you do if you're doing something right, good, and you got another good thing to do? Right? What do you do? Let's say, for example, you're learning Torah. You're learning, right? And a mitzvah comes up. That's not a good example.
Let's say you're mourning, but now you have a chance to serve food at a wedding.
That's not a mitzvah, though. That's not a mitzvah. But this is
your mourning.
No.
Serve food at.
Let's not give that.
Bringing the bride and groom food.
That's not.
Or how about?
Well, let's not use that example of mourning and sad things. And God forbid we should ever know these things. But let's say, for example, right? I think we learned this in the holidays. Let's say you're learning, and the mitzvah of Hanukkah menorah comes, and learning Torah is a commandment. Lighting the Hanukkah menorah is a commandment, right? Or let's say, for example, we have this example listed in Mishnayos. So you could daven mincha and musaf at the same time on Shabbat. It's both in the afternoon. Let's say it's after 12:30, and already now comes the time to daven the afternoon service, and you have the extra service for Shabbat. Which one should you do first? Musaf or mincha? I mean, you guys know the answer because we do musaf. Actually, we daven musaf before the time for mincha. But let's say not, right? What do you do? So which mitzvah do you do first? This is a scenario that's dealt with in halacha a lot. Right? Let's say, for example, people are learning. Some guy comes in, he needs help with his flat tire. It's a mitzvah to help another person. Should you go help him?
On Shabbos?
No, obviously not Shabbos.
Well,
on Tuesday.
You were just doing the other one on Shabbos. I wanted to make sure.
Right. So text number 5. The Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad movement, says like this: if it's possible, it's a whole long text. Text 5 is quite a long. It's quite a long text. So if it's possible to forego it to be performed by someone else, and you shouldn't interrupt your studies, interrupt your mitzvah, then fine. But if the mitzvah cannot be performed by someone else, then you should interrupt your. So, for example, like giving tzedakah, right? It includes such a case as giving tzedakah. You're a better candidate to give, or your words will be more comforting to the recipient. Another example includes a case when another's performance will be inadequate, or like, for example, there's not enough people to escort the deceased. So he said, now if it's a mitzvah, let's say it's Shema, or some like a mitzvah, we learn the menorah. You stop learning and you do the menorah. But here, these examples in the third paragraph are good examples, because it's not a time related mitzvah. You have to do it now. Charity, I can give charity now. I'll give charity when I'm finished. The guy needs money, so someone else can give him $10. You know what I'm saying, right? So the question is, which one should you prioritize? So well, it all depends. If no one else could do it now, then I'll do it now. Now let's go back to the scenario. The Jewish people were at the splitting of the sea. The mitzvah was to collect all the wealth from the Egyptians. That's a mitzvah that if they didn't do it now, they wouldn't get it done. Now we understand why the Jewish people are collecting the gold and silver. Because
There's no guarantee it'll still be there when they if
no, they're never coming back.
Right.
No, they aren't coming back. You know, by the way, did you see that documentary? It was an article. They found a wheel under the sea breeze. There's a chariot wheel.
I have heard that, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there is. The chariot wheels there.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Now, so now the question is, collecting the money was a temporary mitzvah. Let's say it's a mitzvah. Not let's say, it is a mitzvah. God commanded it. That's a one-time mitzvah. What's the biggest eternal mitzvah of all time? The Torah, right? The Torah is the reason why the world was created. Straight out. That is the reason why the world was created. In fact, we have multiple examples in the Torah where, for example, Moshe tells the heavens, come here. Why does he tell heaven and earth to come here? Because if the Jewish people don't do the Torah, the world doesn't have any reason to exist. Also, in the verse in the first verse, it says in the beginning, it says Rashis is the first. So for the Jewish people were the first. And also it says when we make Kiddush. If you notice in the beginning of the book of Genesis, it says day 1, day 2, day 3. But on day 6 it says the day 6, the sixth day. Not day 1, the sixth day. Why? Because it's referring to the sixth day. Which sixth day is special? The 6th of Sivan, when the Torah was given to the Jewish people. Basically to say, if that day doesn't exist, then the whole creation of the world doesn't exist. So I understand you doing a mitzvah. I understand, but I mean, it doesn't seem to balance out. This is where you need chassidus. This is where you need, because like I said before, there's so many stories in the Torah that don't make sense. You need chassidus to explain. So before we get to the chassidic explanation, I gotta give a little bit Kabbalistic explanation. Okay. When God created the world, He used energy. Okay, godly energy. Now this godly energy is embedded in everything in the world. Everything in the world is embedded with godly energy. Now, certain things are usable. They can be elevated. Their potential could be realized. Certain things not. That's why we get the kosher and not kosher, right? But our job, and Kabbalah explains the diaspora in this vein as well. Why are Jews spread out all over the world? It's because to utilize the godly energy embedded in that part, right? So I think in class number 1, or maybe of this book, or maybe in the previous book, we spoke about how Egypt was a very low place. Remember how Abraham had to hide his wife in a box? Not because she was misbehaving. No. Right? Relax, I'm not getting any ideas. Why? Because Egypt was such an immoral place that Abraham was afraid that they would kill him. It was a very, very bad place. So the Jewish people taking all the wealth from Egypt and then using that gold and silver to build a temple for God, that would represent the biggest, from one extreme to the other extreme, to elevating the spark, so to speak. So that's why it was so important. What it says, I see in text number 6, said the Jewish people, they emptied out Egypt. What does it mean? They emptied out Egypt. They emptied out all the godly sparks. According to Kabbalah, there's 282 sparks, and they elevated 202. I'm not going to get into the number. Why that number? And so the very purpose of the exile, because remember, the destruction of the second temple, you can say the Jewish people sinned, idolatry, Basil's hatred. Okay, fine, the exile. But when the Jewish people were slaves in Egypt, what did they do wrong? Why did they deserve it? They didn't do anything wrong. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 tribes, slavery. What did they do wrong? So Kabbalah explains that the purpose of the slavery wasn't a punishment. It was the Jewish people should go there and then be refined and Because, like, for example, when you want to get the impurities out of gold and silver, you put on the fire, right? Was to be refined and to elevate what was there. That's why they had to take everything. Interesting, by the way. According to Halacha in the Torah, it says a Jew is not allowed to live in Egypt. Did you know that? A Jew is not allowed to live in Egypt. Out of all the country, well, Egypt's the only anti-Semitic. Why? You can live it anywhere else. Why can't a Jew live in it? One of the reasons it says that a king cannot have too many horses. A king's not allowed to have too many things. Why? Too many wives, too much money, and too many horses. Why? Because the best horses come from Egypt. Lawrence of Arabia, anybody?
That was in Egypt.
Silence. Get out. So the best horses come from Egypt. So in order that we shouldn't go back to Egypt, when a king's not allowed to have too many horses. In fact, Maimonides, who had to live in Egypt because Maimonides lived in Spain, and first he escaped the fanatical Christians. So he ran to the southern Spain, and then the fanatical Muslims came, the Almohads came, and he had to run away from them. And he ran. He lived in a cave. He was in Fez, Morocco, and he settled in Cairo. That's where he was the Sultan's doctor. That's when he became famous as a doctor. So he would sign his name. I can't remember how many years he lived in Egypt, but he would sign his name, Moshe ben Maimon, Moshe the son of Maimon, who violates 3 commandments every single day because he lives in Egypt. Now, so the Zohar, Kabbalah explains why can't we go back? Because the whole purpose of a Jew living around the world is to elevate the sparks, is to elevate the world. So something that's already elevated, what are you doing here? Goodbye. Go somewhere else. Your job is done here. Imagine a UPS driver delivers the package and then stays on your doorpost, your front door. Creep. Right? You're done. Dismissed. So that's why Jews can't go back to Egypt. So the reason why the Jews were taking all the wealth was to elevate the spark. But then God comes and says, "I understand that's what you're doing, but I got another job for you, and that is take the Torah." What you think about it? This actually makes the question even stronger. Why were the Jews? I touched on this a second ago. Why did the Jews go to Egypt? In order that they should be proper tools, they should be proper fitting to receive the Torah. The only reason why they went down to Egypt was to go back up. Was like a graph kind of thing. Because in order to go up, you got to go down. I know. We don't jump too much anymore. But if you're gonna jump, what do you got to do before you jump? You bend down. In order to go up, right? In order to go up, you got to go down. So in order to make the Jewish people viable, a proper receptacle and a conduit for Torah, and to be God's messengers in the world, they had to go through Egypt. So the whole logic doesn't make any sense. You're trying to empty out the sparks. Why? That's what God wants. But God wants you to get the Torah. I mean, the whole logic is faulty. You understand the question?
Well, it's a timing issue. Do one, then the other.
But God told you to get out of Egypt. They left Egypt, and now they don't want to leave the seabed, or the seashore. Because Sally
saw seashells there.
Exactly.
Did they know that they had to receive the Torah?
Yeah.
Did.
That
So
was
even before this mitzvah of getting all of the jewels.
Yeah.
And all of that, they already knew that
Yeah.
there was another commandment.
They started counting from the Exodus. They won because they knew they were going to receive the Torah. They knew they weren't going straight into Canaan. That wasn't a surprise. They knew that wasn't going to happen. So the whole reason why going down to Egypt was to receive the Torah. So they delayed going to get the Torah because what they had to do in Egypt. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but they thought they were doing the right thing by emptying out Egypt.
Obviously, but how did that logic come? So the Jewish people were really spiritual tuned to do what Hashem wanted them. Why did Moshe have to pull them away? If they're doing what God wanted, God wants them to get the Torah in order to refine the world. Okay, I basically Text 7 and 8 speak about how important the giving of the Torah is. I already said it. So let's get to, skip ahead to text number 9. Right, this is the question over here, right? That was on the board. There was significance and purpose of collecting the Egyptian wealth, but was far less than receiving the Torah. After all, the Talmud tells us the entire creation was dependent on this day, right? The 6th day. With text 9. Okay. This is what we're going to, the title of the class, being fully invested in what you're doing. So like this. It's not that the Jewish people were distracted by money or they didn't want to follow Moshe's commandment. When you're doing the right thing, when you're doing something, which hopefully it's the right thing, because if it's the wrong thing, then everything I'm saying doesn't apply. If you're doing the right thing, you should be totally invested in that thing. And the only thing that consumes you is the task at hand, nothing else. In fact, when it comes time to do the next right thing, I should have to tear you away from that thing you're doing. It's not that and the Rebbe explains in text number 9 at length that tearing them away doesn't mean that they weren't willing to go from the seabed, or they didn't appreciate the historic importance of Sinai. What it means is that they were authentic and they were totally present, invested in what they were doing right now, which was to elevate Egypt. That's why Moshe had to schlep them. Let's read the Rebbe's words. Text number 9. The spiritual explanation for the notion that Moshe dragged them by force doesn't mean, God forbid, the Jewish people after the splitting of the sea didn't want to follow. And you see the word want is in italics, because it's important to follow Moshe's instructions. Certainly they would carry out Moshe's command, which is really God's command, obviously. To travel from the Red Sea with full devotion and joy. What does it mean that Moshe had to drag them by force? It means that it was contrary to the understanding in Torah. With regard to the instruction to empty Egypt, the Jewish people were completely invested in the job of redeeming the captive sparks of Egypt with their entire being, such that tearing them away from that job was forced. They only followed suit out of their acceptance for God's will. Because remember, originally they didn't want. God said to do it, so now they're doing it. So what was the mistake? Mistake. What did God? Because sometimes we get so invested in something which is good, but then we have to ask ourselves, what does God want from me right now? There's a great story in the Gemara. Okay, and so before we had a set calendar, the Rosh Chodesh, the new month, was set by witnesses would come to the court in Jerusalem. They would testify that they saw the new moon. Now, a lunar month is really 29 and a half days. So Rosh Chodesh could either be, so the month goes 29 days. So the day 1 of the next month could either be on day 30, or if it's 30 days, then day 31 is day 1. Okay, it depends on witnesses. So one time, these guys come on the 29th day, and they testify to the head of the Jewish the Supreme Court. Was a man named Rabbi Gamliel, and he said, "Okay, the witnesses testified, and Rosh Chodesh is tomorrow. Day 1 is tomorrow." And this was important. This was important because that day 1 was Rosh Hashanah. Now there were other rabbis present, part of the court. They said, "No, these witnesses are full of garbage. They don't know what they're talking about. They couldn't have seen it, because remember, seeing the new moon is not just based on testimony; it's mathematical calculation. They're lying. They just want to be heroes." So Rabbi Yeshua said, Rabbi Yeshua was a great rabbi at the time, and he said, Rosh Chodesh is not day 30, it's really 31. Now, word got back to Rabbi Gamliel, the head of the Supreme Court, that Rabbi Yeshua thought there was a different day. Now, why does it make a difference? Because 10 days after Rosh Hashanah is Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur you can't carry, you can't work, you can't eat. So he told Rabbi Yeshua that you're going to show up to me, right, on the day you think is Yom Kippur, which is not Yom Kippur. Right? But according to your calculation, you're going to come carrying your wallet and your stick, and and you're going to show everybody that that's not the day of Yom Kippur. So it's a whole story. But then basically, he realized that if we're going to challenge everything, we can challenge every ruling that the rabbis made in the past. And he showed up on the day that he really thought was Yom Kippur, and he showed up carrying, and Rabbi Gamliel kissed him and hugged him and said thank you, and he said, you're my teacher for because he was wiser than them, and whatever that means, a great man, and you're my student for accepting. But what's the point of this story? Rabbi Yeshua felt that today was Yom Kippur. To him, he would never violate Yom Kippur. But God said, where do I want you right now? I want you to do what I say. So a Jew has to be fully invested. A person has to be fully invested what they have to do to an extreme. Because fully invested means that you don't start comparing this act to the next act. So if I start asking you, for example, which is the bigger mitzvah? And you start answering, you're doing something wrong. Because you know what the biggest mitzvah is? The mitzvah you're doing right now. That's the biggest mitzvah. Because you know something? You know what a mitzvah is? A mitzvah is a chance to connect to God. That's actually the Aramaic translation of mitzvah, connection. So if you start comparing one mitzvah to the next mitzvah, then you're not fully invested in what you're doing. It's true there is another mitzvah, but when you're doing this mitzvah, that's it. This is the only thing you're doing. And like the previous Rebbe, whose yahrzeit is tonight, explains this in text number 10. So he says it here: the smallest instruction from God remains godly, and that becomes a focal point for of the universe. The Jews who left Egypt recognized that, and that's why they were so emotionally invested in the job. So let's read text 10. The word mitzvah means to connect. One who does a commandment connects with God, who commands a mitzvah. This is then what the Talmud means. The reward for mitzvah is a mitzvah, namely, the fact that a Jew is able to connect himself with God. That itself is the reward. And he gives a great example, if I may say so myself. To illustrate the matter, you have a guy who's a nobody. He's a simple man, right? He's not educated, prestigious, whatever it is. Now, the person's entire universe is material matters alone. For example, food, football, something, whatever, like, what does he have to speak about? His horse and everything else. Now, one day, a wise sage instructs the simple person to do something for him. Now, before these guys talk to each other, the wise sage doesn't even notice this puya, this farmer. He's what do they have to talk about, right? Now, with this instruction, the simple person's existence is born. All of a sudden, he feels his own existence. He means something. The sage has communicated to him. The sage, too, suddenly considers the simple person as a viable entity. As with this communication, the simple person goes from being a non-entity, worthless, to useful. Besides this, the very communication unites the lofty sage with the simple person, for the latter is carrying out the wish of the former. Now, what emerges from here is two things. Number one, the simple person's identity is born. And number two, a connection is formed. So the sage over here is God, and we're the simple. We're zero. The only reason why we're worth anything is because we can do a commandment from God. Otherwise, if I ask you a question, is a rock worth anything? No, it just takes up space.
What if it's a pet?
A rock?
I have an attorney
He
that
got it.
has a pet rock on his desk.
Pet rock was very popular when I was a kid. You'd actually buy them at the store.
And it would be in a box, and it would say Pet Rock, and there would be a paper in there that you could name the rock.
Are you talking about rocks like outside with these special rocks?
Like a rock outside.
So, by the way, I don't want to hear you guys complaining about modern day kids because you guys were just as crazy. A pet rock?
Yeah, that was a thing. I never bought one.
That's why you're still allowed through our doors.
Okay, so does a rock have any value?
So a rock has no value. I mean, yeah, I guess but it's a rock. It just takes up space. a human being, what's your value? Because you can walk, talk, and consume? Because you're a consumer of stuff? That's your value? You have value.
Businesses.
Huh?
That's your value to businesses.
Yeah, but that's not value. They don't value you. They value your money.
Exactly.
They value your consumption.
Right.
Yes.
What makes a person of anything, the rock also in this case, by the way, of value is that it serves a purpose. Value is purpose. Value isn't existence. Right? Existence is actually hindrance. Existence is not value. If you own a car dealership and the existence of a lot of cars are in your lot, that's not good.
No.
That's a hindrance,
Yes.
right?
That's a liability.
That's liability. Value is purpose. Purpose, if you're doing an equation, value equals purpose squared. When you have purpose, you have value. So a person has no value unless he has purpose. Who gives us purpose? And by the way, this is the problem with modern day society. This is the problem. This is what's not being taught in school. If I tell you what something's right or what's wrong, who am I to say that? When a person has purpose, they feel value, right? And this is study. That's why when people give back and they volunteer, they're happier. This is backed up by science, study after study. The more a person consumes, the more miserable they are, because all they're doing is enhancing their existence, and existence is a bad thing. Because your existence threatens my existence. Because if there's only one bagel, I want that bagel for my existence, and you want that bagel for your existence. So your existence threatens my existence. That's just that's the reality. Existence is a bad thing. Contribution, value is a good thing. Purpose is a good thing. That's how it is. So the ability for us, God gave us purpose, and that gives us value. Like the sage who asked the simple man to do something for him, that gave the simple man who was, again, it's an example. It's obviously not a perfect example, because we don't just throw. This isn't Russia or France, and before the French Revolution. Oh, you're a peasant. No, it's okay. He's just a peasant, right? They don't need their head. Fling.
Thank you, Melbert.
Yeah, exactly. When you're doing a mitzvah, when you're doing something good, and you're thinking, this is God asking me to do this. Forget other jobs, other tasks God might have for me at a different time. Right now, what is God asking me to do? That's the only thing that should consume you is what God's doing, because asking me to do right now, because this is my value right now. And this is what the Rebbe says. This is what we learn from the Jewish people at the sea. The powerful message is text 11a. The powerful message we can learn for our daily life is, when a Jew is invested in a certain element of religious life, he has to be invested 100% with every fiber of his being. So much so that it's impossible to entertain the prospect of another task, such that pivoting away would be considered forced. So you have to be 100% invested to the point that you can't do anything else. But then you got to do something else. Now the question is, how could I be so invested where it's impossible to do anything else and then do something else? It doesn't make any sense. Right? So the answer is, you have to remember who's asking you. It's not about you. It's about God asking you. And if God's asking you to do it, you can do it. Because He created you. He knows. So every person is created in the image of God, right? Right. And God is infinite, right? Yeah. And God's limitless, yeah? So God is giving you this godly ability to be totally invested, because that's what He wants. That's what He's giving you the ability to do. So this is what God is saying. So if 5 minutes ago getting excited felt something impossible, it's precisely you'll find a new mission compelling, right? Before you couldn't, now yes. This is what the Rebbe says in text 11b. When a Jew receives an instruction from the code of Jewish law, or from the leader of the generation, then he or she must interrupt their current task and do a new task. At that point, the Jew is required to pull off something paradoxical. On one hand, the Jew must feel that the second new task is something forced, because he was totally invested in the previous task at hand. And on the other hand, this attitude ought to compel them to feel that they must inject their life and passion into a new task, and a real energy that is entirely unlimited. And so much as the Jew is completely committed and devoted to whatever God wants, while performing the previous task, as was demonstrated by the fact that he was forced to be pulled away. So if you want to know how to be present in the moment, the answer is, whatever you're doing, that's the only thing you're doing. You're not doing anything else. Yes, you know that you have other things to do. Not right now. Right now, this is the only thing you're doing. And it's hard because we're always being pulled, and we feel that if I'm totally invested in what I'm doing now, I'm going to take away from my other responsibilities. And now I'll end up with two stories, at least. One is printed and one I'll say orally. So the story over here, this is from the transcript of the previous Rebbe, it's text number 12, which the previous Rebbe writes that the Shiva students were singing a song, and then they did it 2 or 3 times, and they weren't sure if they should continue singing. So some people continued singing, some people didn't continue singing. So the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, told him to sing, and turned to him and said, they're singing with resolve, but without passion. So he said, I figured I should tell them to sing with more gusto, but my father held me back and saying, for whatever reason, the crowd is singing with a strange resignation today, very tepid. It's as if they really want to do something else, as if they're gone from here. They're doing it, but they're doing it as if they would wish they'd be over with, and their eyes are elsewhere. That's not how it's supposed to be. Rather, wherever we are, we must be there entirely. Later, you may be elsewhere, and when you're there, you'll be 100%. But as long as you're here, you must be here. Of course, when you get to the next thing, you'll be entirely present, and this demonstrates the truth of wherever it is you're engaged with. If it's true, you engage in it with a true invested manner. The main thing is that wherever you are, you should be there all the way, not looking to run to the next thing. So of course, when you get to the next thing, you'll be present there, because you're present in that idea wherever you are. This is a very important point. Wherever you are, be there all the way. This is the hallmark of something that is true. Wherever you are, you want to run away. Rather, you do it deliberately, intentionally. So I'm going to share with you a story that I said a long time ago, but I don't know if you guys remember it. You guys don't remember stories I say last week. So this story, you guys definitely remember. I can say it with absolute confidence.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So this was the previous Rebbe was kicked out of Russia in 1927. So he had to travel, I think it was in 26. The communists were already hot in his tail. So he had to travel, and in Russia, traveling wasn't a safe business, because they can catch you without papers and decide you're a spy. Now the previous Rebbe was making trouble because he was funding and supporting Jewish infrastructure all over Russia. So he had to go. It was a whole story when he went. Like, he went in the middle of the night. So I think, if I remember the story correctly, he left like 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. So the Rebbe, his son-in-law, comes in, and he sees the previous Rebbe is writing letters, he's writing correspondence, and he's totally engrossed in what he's doing. Didn't hear him walk in. So he asks him, I don't know, like, how are you so calm? And he says, because the previous Rebbe said, the person has to be totally invested in what they're doing right now. And the previous Rebbe told him about the Rashba. Rashba lived in the 13th century. He was a doctor for the king. He gave 3 lectures a day. He wrote thousands of halachic responses. So we have those books today. And he practiced medicine, and he saw patients every day, and he had time for a walk. How did he accomplish so much? Someone once asked him. So he said because he was totally invested in that in that activity. That's what we have to be, totally invested. Don't think about what's going to happen, and which leads me to the next story. In 1970, but the 10th of Shvat, which is tonight, some people came, and then a week or two later, I think it was 2 weeks later, whoever came to visit was going back. The Rebbe threw a surprise gathering, Farbrengen. He's talking, and he sees how people in the crowd are looking at their watches because they have to run to the airport. It's getting late. And the Rebbe smiles, says, you have to be invested right here. Right now, there is no airport, there's no plane. And we once showed this video in a class, if you remember correctly. Remember, it says, right, there is no plane, and there's no airport. It doesn't exist. Right now, you got to be right here. Don't worry, when you get to the airport, everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about what's going to be, or how am I going to do that. Just be present. So at the beginning of the class, we started with, you have your family, and this and that, all these different tasks, and which one, and how do I do both? The very premise of the question leads you to trouble. Don't focus on how do I do everything. Just focus on what I'm doing now. Where does God want me right now? And I was going to say a story that I said 18 times. I'm not going to say it on camera because I said it so many times. I'll say it afterwards. You know the story with the pail in jail? Two brothers? Oh, come on. You're terrible guys. So wherever you are, you got to be there all the way. Don't look for the next thing, and certainly don't worry about the next thing. The most important thing is right now. What will happen in 5 minutes will be infinitely important. In 5 minutes. For now, the world stops. You're here, so throw yourself into it. Key points. Moshe had to drag the Jewish people away from the sea as they were busy collecting the spoils that had washed ashore. When two mitzvot collide, when you have two mitzvahs to do, there are guidelines. If the passing mitzvah could be performed just as well by others, you let it go and keep the current one. If not, you have to pivot to the passing mitzvah. So what the Jewish people were doing, where they were collecting Egyptian wealth, was a critical part of the Exodus story, the mitzvah from God to elevate the Egyptian property and utilize it for godly purposes. From a spiritual perspective, number 4, this is because there were many holy, godly sparks in Egypt that needed to be redeemed. Bringing them into Jewish ownership accomplished that. When we're given a mission, a task by God, we ought to be fully invested in it, such that being pulled away seems unfathomable. I can't imagine doing anything else. Yet, when God signals us to move away and not do something else, we got to move on. We got to pivot to the new task with equal passion and gusto. In short, wherever you are, that's where you are, without looking to the next thing. It's impossible. This is possible when we're mindful of and dedicated to the one God who commanded us all. That's the one point. Where does God want me right now? This is true in our religious lives. With our overall lives, be present and fully so. So you want me to tell the story? End up with the story with the pail?
Sure.
All right. I know Dali doesn't hear the story. Story goes with, when I start saying the story, you guys will remember it, I'm sure. The two brothers who were colleagues of the Alter Rebbe, Shner Zalman, they lived in the 1700s or late 1800s. They were Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhensk and Zusha Vanapoli. They used to travel, took upon themselves like self-exile. In their towns there were famous rabbis. But they wanted to feel like nobodies. Great people would do this. They would travel around, sleep in the shul. Anyway, so one time they got into trouble. I don't know. The people were very wary of wanderers. I can't remember why. They got into trouble, and they were thrown into jail. Now, back then, jail wasn't with comfortable beds and TV and 3 square meals. It was a terrible place to be. And so it was a room full of a bunch of smelly men, and in the room was a pail for
Doing your business.
right. And one of the brothers, I think it was Elimelech, became upset. So his brother Azusha asked him, "Why are you upset, Elimelech?" So he says, "Because according to the Jewish law, you're not allowed to pray in a place of filth that smells bad. You're not allowed to pray to God, in a smelly place. And it's a time for mincha, the afternoon service, and I can't pray. I'm going to miss out on that prayer." So it tells his brother in the Malach, he says, the same God who told you to daven mincha is commanding you now not to daven mincha. So you're serving God by not davening mincha. And the Malach realized he's right. You're serving God, but not serving God. So they started meditating on that concept. And they started singing. And then they broke into a happy song because they're serving God. And they started dancing around the pail. And then the other prisoners joined in. They're all dancing around the pail. The guard walks in. Said, what's going on? So some guy said, I don't know, but the Jews, obviously it's the Jews' fault. Jews, something with the pail, they're connecting to God with the pail. He says, what? They're serving God with the pail? I'm taking the pail out. So Elimelech, Zusha goes to Elimelech, now we can daven mincha. Have a good week.